Roberts. I'm the arena announcer for the Utah Jazz. Time now to talk about the Utah Jazz and the NBA on the Salt Lake Tribune Jazz Podcast. How about this Jazz? And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's meet Eric Walden, Andy Larson, and Joel Cardenas.
Welcome back to the How About This Jazz Podcast. I'm Joel Cardenas, your co-host and moderator. Joining me, as always, are Salt Lake Tribune Jazz beat writers Andy Larson and Eric Walden. So, guys, we'll obviously talk Jazz second, but it's Halloween season, and I was just curious, what's the best costume that you guys have ever pulled off?
Ooh.
I can tell you mine, just to start off.
Please.
So, when I was working at the College of Law at the U, I dressed up as Walter White. Had the hat, had the jacket, and they let me change the College of Law's front office into a meth lab, basically.
Wow.
And I gave away blue Jolly Ranchers to the kids. And one guy, when his kid came over and said, "Daddy, what is he supposed to be?" The dad said, "Oh, he's a farmer."
That's correct. I like it.
Yeah, farming meth. I like it.
Yeah.
While Andy is thinking about it, I'll go ahead and throw mine out there. I have been for a number of years in a row the famous rock and roller Slash from Guns N' Roses.
The one you have a tattoo of on your arm?
Yes, that one. I've had decent costumes over the years, and then like last year I realized that I'd worn enough of that stuff enough times that like I was in need of an upgrade. So I did like a big time upgrade, and it looked good.
Nice.
Yeah, it was authentic.
Nice.
If you already have him on your arm, doesn't that mean that like you already are him the other days?
Yeah, we'll go with that. I think that's a fair. I think
He's
that's
a party.
fair analysis.
He's a party.
Yeah, I mean, people look at me and they're like, I can see the Slash coming through.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I'm just trying to think. Like when I was a kid, I was Fred Flintstone one year. That was cool. Sumo wrestler in like high school. I had one of those inflatable costumes that are really fun.
I like the sumo wrestler one. I'm maybe disagreeing with you that Fred Flintstone was cool.
Oh, it was very cool.
Okay.
I looked great.
See, I thought you would have gone with like Barney Rubble because of your hair color.
Yeah, I mean that would have made more sense but I wanted to be Fred Flintstone. So, you know, after the haters.
Hey, those vitamins are good.
I mean, honestly, in recent years, I've kind of just lamed out. I have a scientific white jacket that I wear to parties and whatnot, and just have done. I'm a scientist.
And you play a nerd.
Yeah, which is what I am. I did.
Your nerddom comes through like my slashdom comes through.
What's the name of the main character in Semi Pro?
Jackie Moon.
Yeah, I was Jackie Moon one year.
That's a good
3
one.
years ago.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Nice. Well, happy Halloween for those listeners out there who like Halloween. But for people who are like me, we're kind of already past it. But anyway, let's get started. So today we got a lot to talk about. So we're talking about the Jazz's first 3 games so far in this season. We're also talking a little bit about Hassan Whiteside and not looking too bad after all. We're also talking about Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, and his still ineffective or inefficientness, if that's a word. Plus, we'll also give you our weekly preview of what's to come on the Jazz schedule. Before we get started, let me remind you that if you want to keep up to date with the latest Jazz coverage, sign up for our How About This Jazz newsletter at sltrib.com/newsletters. Okay, so the Jazz are 3-0 after a full week of regular season play. Defeated the OKC Thunder 107-86 in the season/home opener. Bogey led scoring with 22 points. Jazz went up to Sacramento and defeated the Kings last Friday in what was a physical and at times very sloppy game. Utah was down for a good part of the game until defense stepped up in the second half. And then the Jazz's first week of the season concluded with a home win against the Nuggets, 122-110. Rudy leading the way with 23 points and 16 rebounds, getting that double-double as he always does. So guys, to kick things off, what are your team takeaways or something that has stood out to you after the first week?
Yeah, it's been a weird first week because there hasn't been a tremendous test. I think the first half of the Denver game was really the closest thing to it. And even then it was kind of keeping constant against the Jokic minutes and beating the bench minutes in the first half. And then, honestly, the Jokic and the Nuggets came back before Jokic went down. And then, the second half was relatively smooth sailing. The third quarter was evenly played. Fourth quarter was was a big lead. But, Jazz won the second half by 10 points. Over the course of a whole game, that's 20 points. That's about what I would expect them to win, like, a game against a Jokic and Murray-less Nuggets team, So, like, I thought it was a good performance overall. I'm not sure that we've learned a lot about this team overall. They're not shooting the ball very well right now. I'm sure that'll change. I think more than anything, we've learned something individually about kind of the new players and how they're fitting into their roles. And, we're going to spend a whole segment on Hassan Whiteside later, but guys like Eric Paschall have looked pretty good in filling in that backup four in the George Niang Memorial minutes. And then I would also say that, I think Jared Butler has been probably less effective than the preseason minutes kind of indicated that he would be. He's had a little bit of struggles dealing with his lack of size in real NBA minutes and kind of how to fit into the offense as well, because as good as he looked in the preseason, it was pretty ball dominant, and he just can't afford to be in those second units when he's the fourth or fifth best player on the floor. So I think it's obviously been a good first three games for the Jazz, but as far as like true tests, we haven't seen real competitive action from them yet. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought this up, Joel, because I actually wrote an article about this, taking a look at how the first week of the season went, and 3 games is not a huge sample size, so it's hard to say, is this indicative of what's to come, or are these just discardable outliers? But I wound up looking at 3 pros and 3 cons, and some of them are exactly what Andy just mentioned. It appears they've got, maybe a few more tools in the toolbox, just because Hassan Whiteside has been pretty decent thus far, which, again, we'll get into a little more later. Eric Paschall, I think, has surprised a lot of people with his efficacy thus far in the role that he's played. And yeah, to Andy's point, there were high expectations on Jared Butler after his summer league and preseason play, and we haven't really seen that translate to the regular season yet. But Quinn Snyder does keep rolling him out there for short stints, just to get him that experience against NBA level competition. So hopefully that'll pay off down the line. As far as some of the bad things, I think we can say that the perimeter defense is still a little bit of a work in progress. We saw Aaron Gordon kind of have his way with them last night. Whether it was against Bogey, whether it was against Royce. Honestly, like, Eric Paschall maybe had like the most effective minutes against him in the first half, and then when Jokic went out and the Jazz were able to deploy Rudy on him, obviously Rudy's going to have success more so than anyone else. But past that, I think we've seen a little bit more nastiness, a little more edginess to this team, just in terms of Hassan Whiteside being a guy you maybe don't want to mess with. I think they've honestly kind of maybe lacked that a little bit since Jay Crowder left. Ball movement, stagnation has been kind of a theme on offense. Andy referenced the 3-point shooting. Really, at this point, the only guys who've shot the ball well have been Joe Ingles and Mike Conley, and everyone else has been, kind of below average.
Yeah,
but
sub 30%.
I don't think Donovan Mitchell is going to shoot 30% from 3 for the season. I don't think Bojan Bogdanovic is going to shoot 31% from 3 for the season. So
remember last year when you were going to write the Jazz are sucking at 3 article after 3 games?
I was going to write the Jazz are sucking at 3 through 3 games article.
I was like, small sample size, bro. And was I right? I was right.
Yeah. And I was going to write that it was a small sample size, but that it was something that had happened in the first 3 games.
I don't like it.
And you overreacted.
You overreacted.
I wasn't overreacting. I was saying
that's our job as the media.
I was saying this doesn't necessarily, like I prefaced this segment with, it's not necessarily an indicator of things to come, but it's something that happened over 3 games and over the first week of the season. It's something to talk about, Andy Larson, which is what this podcast is, by the way.
Yeah, but I okay, so and now this is actually an interesting argument to me. So, and I think to me, like, things are most interesting when they have impact on the future, right? Like, I'm not talking about articles anymore, but like, I think, what excites me about Hassan and Eric's play so far is that it may mean that they play well for the remaining 79 games, right? Whereas I think like the shooting is essentially variance, right? Like, is you flipping coins in a dark room and getting heads or tails, so to me, that's, I'm kind of a process over results guy, and I think I've seen good process from the Jazz so far. even if the shots aren't going down.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, guys, next topic. So, in our season preview show, I asked you guys, Hassan Whiteside's season will be nothing short of blank. Eric said mercurial. Andy said he's nothing short of skeptical when it comes to Hassan. Well, maybe it's time for all of us to maybe apologize. I'm not sure. But expectations might have been low, let's be honest, for Hassan Whiteside. But he's looked good so far off the bench this season, given it's only been 3 games. So he's averaging 1.3 blocks, 7.7 rebounds, and 8 points per game in these first 3 games, which might not be, too bad for what we expected that was going to come from him. So against the Kings, the Jazz defensive rating was 63 with Whiteside on the court. And Hassan is a tough dude, as Eric, you had mentioned a little bit, and he was ejected on Tuesday night's game when he and JaMychal Green got into it in the fourth quarter. So, of course, the Jazz fans all cheered up, and really they've been supporting him from the start, from the beginning, which, of course, he's a player, he's a Jazz player, he's going to get that support. But I think there's that element of surprise, like, oh, okay, you're kind of stepping up here a little bit. So, given it's just a week into the season, if Whiteside can stay consistent with this type of play, how does it strengthen or tweak, if applicable, the Jazz's rotation this season? Is it simply gives Rudy more time to rest off the bench? Is it the toughness factor, or can Hassan's play change other things for the Jazz?
I don't think it changes anything about what they're doing from right now. I think they're still going to be using the same rotation where Hassan Whiteside plays what I call the middle minutes of each quarter, where Rudy Gobert is taking a break, and then that allows Rudy to play the end of first and third quarter, beginning of second and fourth quarter minutes against opposing bench lineups, which has been so effective. I think 2 things have been better for me than I expected, especially early on in the season. One, Hassan Whiteside's screening has been better. Donovan Mitchell talked about it yesterday, and he's not screening in exactly the right place that he should be, but they've been much more effective screens than Hassan Whiteside has generally set throughout his career. Hassan was famous for being a guy who just went up there to set a screen and then immediately slip it. Never really made a lot of contact on the screens in order to get guys open. But the Jazz's offense is so predicated on that screen working really well, and so it's really critical that he stays up there and screens and re-screens and gets guys open. And he's been better at that than I expected. The second thing is verticality. When he is a rim protector, he's been a very, in the past, a very jumpy rim protector where he's jumping into guys, getting fouls, and generally, not doing the right thing. He has certainly fouled a lot in his early play, but there have been just as many plays where he hasn't committed the foul and has stayed vertical and made life really tough on his opponents, and whether that ends up in a block or a missed pass or just a missed shot. So those 2 things have been really good. I don't think he's played an elite savvy guard yet, and that's kind of what I'm waiting to see. Obviously Jamal Murray out for the Nuggets. De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield are good players, but they're not like super savvy players. I want to see him play like Chris Paul, Devin Booker, kind of like Dame, kind of the elite guards of the West, to see if they are able to get him in space and kind of attack that way. Because I don't think he's been good at that. He's clearly not the mover that like Rudy Gobert is, obviously, right? So. But still, again, for a minimum player playing a 15-minute a night role, he's been very good, and props to him for improving his game and beating expectations here in Utah.
I'm going to double down on my assessment of mercurial, just because, yeah, he has provided those good things. The screening has been better than I expected it would be. The verticality has been there, but he's got holes to his game, and he's got mistakes that he makes consistently. The excessive fouling that Annie mentioned, for one. When he gets the ball on offense, he still tends to think that he's in Miami a little too much, and is a little excessively prone to like throwing up a shot rather than like looking for, Royce or Joe in the corner or whoever. I feel like he's a little bit tentative sometimes defensively in the mid-range. He still is processing Quinn's directive of you don't necessarily need to challenge guys who are in the mid-range, but he also feels very tentative in terms of like laying back on shots he could challenge.
Yeah, there was a pick and pop against the Nuggets where Aaron Gordon pops out for three and he doesn't even try, and I think obviously if he closes that out, I think Aaron Gordon drives by him and that's what he's worried about. And so maybe, maybe that is a smart move, but I think you have to give a little bit of an effort before you get back into the paint and try to rebound.
Yeah. So given all of that, when I say mercurial, like I didn't mean that as an insult. I'm just saying there are things there are nights where he's going to make Jazz fans like ecstatic with what he does out there, and then there are going to be a lot of times where they're doing the face palm thing because it's like, what is he thinking there? That said, for a veteran minimum contract, I think he's been an excellent addition. I think he's been a great backup for Rudy. I think what he's provided to this point has been better than what Derek Favors provided last year or what Tony Bradley did the year before. So I'm very pro these Hassan Whiteside minutes thus far.
Yeah, I mean, even in a game where Donovan Mitchell wasn't playing that well against Sacramento, that he was plus 18 in 15 minutes. And I think in large part due to his contributions. I mean, you're right about the offense. He hasn't figured that out, but like, I think defensively he's played a big role, and I think I give him a lot of credit for figuring that out.
No, definitely a pleasant surprise, hopefully, for the whole season for the Utah Jazz. Let's move on to the next topic. So, Andy, in our last episode, you talked about Donovan Mitchell and how, for him, one of his main goals this season is to be more efficient. So far, after 3 games, that inefficient thing isn't going so well. So he was 6 of 17 for 16 points in the win against OKC, plus minus of 20, but he was 9 of 25 against the Kings, did grab 27 points, plus minus of 18, and then 9 of 20 for 22 points against the Nuggets with a plus minus of minus 4. Donovan's leading the team in scoring, but he's still inefficient from the floor. Is his continued inefficiency issues something to worry about? I mean, it's only been 3 games, but or is it much ado about nothing? We've had people say, at least I saw, Jazz fans on social media saying, is it the new rule changes? Is it just bad shot selection that he still hasn't overcome that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the rule changes have affected him compared to last season. He did do a lot of like hooking on drives and trying to get guys up in the air for threes that worked reasonably well last season that he can't do anymore. The first 2 games he was terrible inside the arc, and then against Denver he was great inside the arc and then awful outside of it, 1 for 9 from 3, right? So I think the 3-point shooting will come along. I expect him to be as good of a 3-point shooter as he was last season. I expect him to figure out more of the interior stuff. I think essentially right now he's making some bad reads. He's trying to beat guys like Davion Mitchell one-on-one, and it's just not the play. Last night against the Denver Nuggets, they were kind of high hedging or trapping against him, which means you've got 2 defenders on you, and he tried to split those double teams more often than not. That's a high risk play, right? Because you are really kind of trying to squeeze your body in through all these arms and limbs, and it really does lead to a lot of turnovers. He had 5 in the second half against the Nuggets. So, I think ultimately he needs to make better decisions out there. And he did by the fourth quarter of both Sacramento and Denver. So that's good to see kind of that in-game growth. But you obviously want to see it earlier in the game, and then I think you also, we hoped for a jump off of the back of what happened in the playoffs last year, right? Like that he would kind of be able to put it all together, and so far we haven't seen that level of Donovan. Now that doesn't mean it's not coming. In fact, I would bet that it is, but like, so far it hasn't been a better Donovan Mitchell than we've seen.
I'm glad that you brought up the turnovers against Denver, because honestly, it's that was sticking out in my mind.
They were bad.
He's the problem is he's so capable of making exceptional plays that he becomes overconfident at times in his ability to make them, and you see him try to split double teams over and over and over and lose the ball, and all of a sudden Denver's racing the other way for a transition 3 or whatever. Yeah. He needs to Andy's point, Andy said he needs to make better decisions. He needs to make the simpler play more often, rather than, being so determined to generate mismatches by breaking this double team, getting into the lane, drawing another defender, and then kicking it. Like, he needs to just make that pass earlier. This team is exceptional when the ball is moving fast and consistently. when they're rotating it around, when they're generating mismatches that way. And there's just been so much kind of over dribbling, so much unnecessary isolation, so much trying to generate advantages, that way. And they don't need to do it, right? Screens and passing, that's what they've been exceptional at. That's what they need to get back to. And Donovan in particular, is it awesome when he, splits a double team and gets in the lane, and whether that means getting all the way to the rim for a dunk or a contorting layup, or whether that means him passing it at the last minute to Royce in the corner. Yeah, those are awesome highlight reel plays, but right now he's just as he's just as likely to turn it over as he is to make one of those. So you'd like to see him cut down on those kinds of errors.
Yep, 100%. Make the simple play. That's good point. No, I think that's totally what it is. It's just, there were 4-on-3s to be had last night that the Jazz didn't take advantage of until very late, and I thought he needs to, just do better.
Okay, guys. So last week in our season preview show, there was one name that I really didn't bring up as far as, looking into the season, and obviously he'll play a huge role, and that was Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is flat out balling out. So he is leading the league in rebounds, averaging 19 rebounds. As far as total rebounds, he's second behind, I believe it's Valanciunas. Against Denver, he had his 23 and 16. He's just balling out. He's beasting out. Is it crazy for me and for Jazz fans to think, okay, this is the year that Rudy has not only is going to step it up more for, obviously, we know he's going to be defensive player, at least top 3 defensive player of the year, nominee, whatever you want to call it. But can he really reach the point where this year he becomes, as important as Donovan's play, if not a little bit more for the Jazz to be successful, if not even a top 5 MVP candidate? Or am I just going crazy?
I think you're going a little crazy. I haven't seen that much from Rudy that I haven't seen before. I think he's been good on the glass. I think he's been good on offense against some really weak bigs. Last night there wasn't a big, and, got hacked a ton, and that's how he got his points, right? So, I think he's been, he's been good. He's been the Rudy Gobert that we believe in, but, there have also been turnover issues at times. He hasn't, dominated in the post in kind of a, like he did with the French national team in the Olympics. This has been Rudy Gobert, and, I think at least the NBA version, and I think it's very good. But as far as new wrinkles, I haven't really seen it. He's just been good at finishing around the rim when he's not getting through contact. And then, I think some of the turnover stuff has been a little weird, but this is Rudy Gobert is a very good player, but no, not a top 5 MVP candidate. Not yet.
Yeah. Obviously he's absolutely central to what the Jazz do, but as much as he wants to, grow his game offensively, he's just not ever going to be, Akeem Olajuwon in the post. He's just not ever going to be Nikola Jokic draining threes. What we want to see from Rudy is, one, him hanging on to the ball, because as Andy mentioned, he has shown this proclivity for dropping it, for losing it, for turning it over. I thought Donovan Mitchell brought up an interesting point the other day, and it's nothing mind-blowing. It's nothing particularly revelatory, but it's just so obviously simple in its efficacy. When Rudy is playing physically and finishing through contact, he's so much more effective. We see all these times where he gets the ball in the post and he goes for these finesse moves, right? And that's usually where you're seeing the ball crash off the backboard and the opposing team running the other way. When he's being physical and drawing fouls and getting to the line, that's where he's at his best.
I don't think I've seen him finish through contact. I think I've seen him get contacted.
There have been moments of
I guess
it's not a consistent thing, but again, this is the point I'm making. When he does that a little more consistently,
I agree. There's
better results.
I agree. The finesse finishes need to go. I don't see him finishing through the contact. I see him going up, getting contacted, and going to the free throw line for 2 free throws, not an and one.
Yeah, that's fair.
I guess which works, which is fine. I'd rather have that than the goofy hook shot that's not going to work. So yeah, I agree with Donovan. I agree with you, but it's in terms of Rudy offensively, it's not anything I haven't seen before. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Simply the point I'm trying to make is, if he can do a little bit less of the finesse stuff, a little bit
Yeah.
more of the strong stuff, like it's going to work out better for everyone.
Word.
Before we get to our look ahead segment, a friendly reminder that if you want all access to our coverage, from the Jazz to our award-winning news reporting, subscribe to the Salt Lake Tribune at sltrib.com/support. Now that the season is underway, each week we will be looking at what's coming on the Jazz schedule and what you should be looking out for in our The Look Ahead segment. So, the Jazz start their 3-game road trip on Thursday in Houston. They take on rookie Jalen Green, who's looking great so far, and the Rockets. Chicago is the next stop on Saturday to take on my Chicago Bulls, gotta say. Zach LaVine continues to ball out, and new additions Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan have fit in nicely to the surprise of some, myself included. And the road trip ends on Sunday when the Jazz face Giannis and the defending champion Bucks. Team is back in action at Vivint Arena Tuesday when the Kings come to town. So some interesting games coming up. I'm biased, but I'm looking forward to Saturday's matchup against the Bulls. Backcourt matchup with Levine and Ball versus Mitchell and Conley is going to be fun to watch. So guys, out of the next 4 games, which game are you looking forward to the most and why? Or is there an individual or duo matchup, kind of like what I mentioned with Chicago and Utah, that you want to spotlight and why?
I do think it's the Bulls matchup that's the most interesting for me, and because I think the Milwaukee game is basically a schedule loss. You know, you're playing a team that is that good on a back-to-back on the road. Like, it's just tough, right? Like, I think they probably lose that game. We also saw them play Milwaukee in the preseason, and you know, obviously it's not the regular season, but it's just, you know, it's something that we've seen before. Chicago is interesting to me because Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan are 2 really talented scoring guards, right? Are the kind of players that the Jazz have problems against, right? A little bit because DeMar DeRozan is so efficient from the mid range, and so that means that the Jazz have to change up their base defense. And you know, Zach LaVine's very athletic and it is a lot bigger and you know it's can jump over a guy like Mike Conley, for example. So how would the Jazz match up against those 2? And then obviously you've got Lonzo Ball there as well. You've got Nikola Vucevic to worry about in the paint. Like that's an interesting roster that's going to be pretty decent this year. So yeah, I'm curious about that game. Houston's going to be, I think, a pretty nothing burger. That's not a very good team. And Sacramento, you know, what we've seen already. So for me, yeah, it's a Chicago game is kind of the swing game in this road trip in terms of what we think of it, you know, come next week.
I do think that the Bulls have the most intriguing appeal, just because they do have all these new faces. That said, I'm not convinced that they're going to be that great this year. I just don't feel like, don't get me wrong. Like in a vacuum, I like all the guys they've added. Like I like Zach LaVine as a player. I love DeMar DeRozan.
You love DeMar DeRozan. Wow.
I wouldn't. This is a weird thing. I'll clarify this. I don't know that I would want him on my team, but he's a guy who for reasons, not even necessarily logical ones, I've just enjoyed watching over the years. Maybe because he is so anachronistic in this era.
I feel you, because that's how I felt when, obviously as a Bulls fan, when he got signed. I'm like, oh, like I like DeRozan, I liked him in Toronto, I liked him in San Antonio, but I don't know how he fits here. He's gonna have to be small, and he's been playing small forward.
Yeah,
because Lonzo's been point.
Right. I just don't know that the Bulls Lonzo has some defensive capability, but I don't know that team has enough defense that I think they're really going to be all that great. I do think they'll be improved over last year just because you know, they do have better players now and they do have more ability to score the ball, but I'm not convinced they're a great fit. I agree with you, Andy, that the Milwaukee game is probably a loss, and yet in spite of that, that's the one that I'm looking forward to seeing most, just because it's Milwaukee. You know, the Bucks are you know, they were and are and remain one of the elite teams in the league. They present kind of unique matchup problems to the Jazz. Like, are we going to see Rudy guard Giannis? Probably not. They've done that before. Are we going to see, you know, Royce guard him? Or I'm interested to see how the matchups play out. I'll use your line. I'll regurgitate your line from earlier. You know, I'm interested to see the process over the results in that one, because I do expect, with it being, you know, the back half of a back-to-back, that they're probably going to lose that one. But I want to see what they pull out. I want to see, you know, kind of the schemes they deploy in seeing how they match up against the champs.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think it's basically kind of what we've seen before, though, from them. You know, I do expect Royce to guard Giannis, and for them to be really trying to prevent the Milwaukee 3 as much as possible. Obviously, with them, as much as anything, it's about getting out in transition, and I think that's just going to be really hard to do on the second night of back-to-back. So, like, I think even the process can be good, but if you're at 90% of the process because you're just tired at the end of a road trip, again, second night of back-to-back after a good team, I just think it's going to be hard for them to kind of do the things that they need to do in the fourth quarter in order to win that game.
Yeah, that might well be their first loss of the season. And if it is, I don't know that anyone should be horribly concerned about it or jump to any conclusions about, oh, this team can't, hold its own against the elite teams of the league or whatever. I think it's far too early to come to any conclusions like that.
Agreed.
Let me add one other quick thing.
Yeah.
We'll tie back in. The one thing that I am disappointed about in terms of being on this road trip is that the Milwaukee game is on Halloween. Back before Andy and I had divided up our respective road trips for the season, I'm a big Halloween guy. It's actually my favorite holiday of the year. And I love, even though I'm an old man at this point, I love getting dressed up. We referenced me being Slash earlier. I had made plans to get a new costume this year, to unveil a new costume. I was going to be Trent Krim, the Independent.
I did.
But
okay.
now that I'm going to be like in Milwaukee, like at a basketball game, I've decided that I don't think I want to go that route.
You should have told me. Now I feel bad. I would have switched trips with you.
That's good. I'm glad you feel bad. I like making you feel bad. Just kidding. No, it really is not that big a deal, and I'm happy to go on this trip. Andy, I know that you went to Chicago and Milwaukee a few months ago on your Amtrak trip.
Yeah.
So I was happy to take this trip.
Okay, but you should still dress up.
I think.
Do you guys know the Kyle Goon dressing up story?
No.
His first year on the beat when he was working for the Tribune, Bill Oram told him that, all the beat writers dress up for Halloween.
No.
No. So Kyle shows up in a costume and was the only one in a costume and was particularly embarrassed about it.
What did he dress up as?
I don't remember. That's a good question. I'll have to ask my sources.
Or we'll have to bring him on the show,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
When the Lakers, when we visit the Lakers, the Jazz visit the Lakers, or the Lakers come here, I believe it's March, if I remember correctly. Andy, Eric, always a pleasure. So remember, listener, to subscribe to the How About This Jazz podcast if you haven't already. And if you have, thank you so much. Remember to let your friends know about it. Doing this podcast every week. Find Andy and Eric's work at sltrib.com. Everything from the triple team to game recaps, to feature pieces, to How About This Jazz as well.
Yeah, I've got a great piece on Joe Ingles and his early days playing basketball in Australia coming up that fans are going to love.
I'm excited.
Nice. It's going to be good. Find us on social media. I'm at Shoel Caronas.
I'm Trib Jazz.
And I'm at Andy B. Larson.
Till next time. Catch you later.